this conversation is the best of Twitter for May 2012. Mm-hmm. 3 great stories, as always, that have been the most widely read amongst our Twitter posts. I'm Ken Lee.
I'm Don Harder.
The theme of this, I think, as we take a look at these posts, is the economy. The economy has been an issue in the general arena for quite some time. And this first article is about PhDs who are taking home welfare checks, getting food stamps. This one PhD, the story that begins with is a medieval historian teacher who takes home a paycheck of about $900 per month, which qualifies her for food stamps. What does this say besides the fact that the economy, that no one is immune from the economy? Do you have any thoughts on this, Don?
Well, I dug into the article a little bit more, and in the news right now, very related to this subject, is the whole idea of the education bubble, that higher education is actually just past the $1 trillion mark in terms of debt. It's a huge burden on all of us, and I have friends who have gone to school, got their grad degree, and are sitting on $80,000 worth of debt, and they're stay-at-home moms. And they're, fine. They're not as far as on food stamps, but
that's why I think, why did they go to college?
Why did they go to college? Yeah. So that, I think, that was my initial reaction. Like, I look at this, I'm like, oh man, this is awful. But then I thought about the long-term effect on our economy, or what it could be, and it's to say, are we going to lose some really talented people because they're looking at this huge mountain of debt down the road and say, no, I can't. I just couldn't. The economy's so unstable.
You mean why bother going to college? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in a way. If you look at a story like this, I'm like, I'm not going to get a grad. I'm not going to get a PhD. Like, there's no guarantee that I'll be able to pay off my loans. I mean, first of all, pay off my loans, but second of all, more importantly, is do that thing that I'm really passionate about, the reason why I went to school.
Just a quick perspective, and then we can go back to your rant about not going to college. Which Don is a college graduate, by the way.
And as are you.
As am I, but I'm not the one making the case not to go to college.
I'm not saying that. I would never say that.
All right. So there are 22 million PhDs who graduated in 2000, or they can't have graduated, but they existed in 2010. And 33,000, according to this article, are receiving assistance. And that's 1 in 1,000. So we're not talking about you get a PhD, it's a factory, and that diploma's useless, right? I mean, a lot of 999 other PhDs are doing quite well. And it's still important. The higher education is still important. We're not arguing against that.
Well, and the other thing, too, is this article is, excuse my rant.
No. I appreciate that. We got to get some gusto in these conversations. Yeah, a little.
No, but I mean, this is also what they're calling tertiary education, which is beyond postgraduate. I mean, that's the other reality. Yeah. Is that this one's very much focused on, it's beyond grad school. It's that extra other degree on top of things. And I think it's still it's very relevant and very important in certain fields, absolutely.
And especially science. We talk to most of our audience have or hold PhDs, become entrepreneurs, start their own companies, and hire scientists who become our clients. There was an interesting movie based on a comic called Piled Higher and Deeper, actually. And I thought it was it's a little bit of a satire on PhDs, how hard they work for what? Kind of what you were talking about. The reality remains, and it's not just the economy, in which a lot of this has become the state has defunded education. They've withdrawn money from the school systems, and now they've had to cut back on positions. And they also said, we're talking about not tenured faculty. This is the unknown kind of dark side. It's the 70% who are untenured, who are a little bit living on the edge here. But it's always been the case that there have been a lot more applicants for one faculty position, maybe 10 to 1 or something like that. So that has not changed. I think one thing that I want to see more of is communication. Not everyone is going to be a tenured professor. Not everyone's going to be a rock star at MIT. So what are the other opportunities? Luckily, in our field in science, they can go into industry. I do think there needs to be more communication, though, right from the beginning. If they happen to ignore your advice and do go to college, they need to have a faculty advisor or a communications program for, you have a car manual, right? At $20,000, let's say, for a Corolla. What's your manual for college and what you want to do?
Right.
And that's a $100,000 investment. There should be some sort of education, some sort of information that explains this to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's something that you brought up when we talked about this earlier, is the whole idea of the compassion side of that. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah. There's a story, Robert Oscar Lopez, I always read the comments, and he used to be, he's actually, as a conservative, a Republican, as he calls him, he's like, I did not sympathize with the plight of these people who took up majors that there was no demand for and are on welfare. I used to be one of those people who didn't care, but then he was an academic. He's 37 years old. His wife was unemployed, and his father's mortgage went under. And so he was in the position that he needed to get a job. And he had a job, but he needed to protect that job. One way he could do that is by joining the armed forces, because they cannot lay you off. And he was the mindset, because that's what they told him, that he would not be deployed. And he gives a story of, he was picked up at 3 a.m, and he said all day they treated him like a prisoner almost, and didn't even feed him. And then as soon as he signed up, they deployed him within those 3 months. When he gets back, his wife fortunately did get a job, but it's across the country. He's living with a roommate, and he's living hand to mouth, basically, at this point. It's like, I had some compassion for him like that. He didn't sign up for that. He signed up for something he loved. He thought he was going to get a living wage. He's doing his very best to earn a living and not be on the doles. And the response to that was tough. You knew what you were getting into. Whoa, that's really cold.
Yeah.
The only redeeming factor about this is, if you look, they have like a thumbs up. The Robert Oscar Lopez received 1,000, and the guy who was responding and being a little bit cold and saying tough luck, he received 200, but that's still 200 too many, I think.
Yeah.
Especially in this economy, have some compassion is what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I thought was interesting about this article in particular is, and this is where my rant was starting, and completely got sidetracked, and I apologize.
Yeah.
But the idea that it's actually the reason why, in some instances, I did a little bit more digging, and it seems like, as you said, the money is being pulled away from these institutions, so they're no longer able to hire more tenure track people. It's because the government and other industries are pulling funding from that. Yeah. So all of a sudden there's that gap, because on the one hand you're like, oh, there's a tremendous need, and then on the other side it's like, well, but we're not making anybody else, we're not generating more talent on the other side either. So it's just an interesting dichotomy.
I wanted to, just because my mother-in-law read this book, and it's about taking money away from the schools, and the schools slash that investment in their people. Right? She actually read a book about the Finnish school system, and the Finnish school system is #1 in the world. Very well educated, great workforce. Their economy shows that they're doing a good job. And they do things very differently over there, and I'm not going to go into that. But one strategic point I want to make is, we all go through ups and downs in life. And as Finnish school systems, they also go through ups and downs. No, there is no utopia.
Sure.
And they were going through a rough patch. Maybe some accomplishments weren't being made as they had been. But they did something different than what we're doing here. Instead of, and when I say they were going through a rough patch, I mean the economy was going down just like it was throughout the world. But they said, how are we going to come out ahead and be stronger? Did they slash education and investment in their students in the future? Actually, they doubled down. Really unorthodox thinking, but I think they came out of it much stronger. And what can we do? I think a lot of people, when they get their budget slash their companies, they slash marketing the first thing. What are you going to do to come ahead the next cycle?
Exactly.
Think about marketing and how you can improve it, and do more with it and invest in it.
Don't get ahead of yourself, because that's the third article.
Yes, it is the third article. So article number 2 is we're talking about the economy and how that has impacted everyone, including PhDs. And the flip side of that is what article number 2 is about. It's about how are we going to get up? How are we going to get over this? And if anything, in the U.S., we've been resilient over the years, and hopefully we are still optimistic. And we're going to be optimistic because there are innovations like the ones that this article out of MIT is coming out with. If it's a user interface, they call it, 3-dimensional, where you can actually grab objects. So it's like Minority Report, when Tom Cruise is taking his hand and manipulating a computer screen, the user interface, and flipping objects over and looking at data. But this is real objects, tangible. You can actually feel these objects.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts here?
It's funny because I was very excited when I read the article, and it's a very pretty article.
Yeah.
The folks at Fast Company do a great job of design. But I was also looking. So I watched the whole video. And I was very impressed.
Yes.
So the first thing I was really impressed about was the video itself.
Of course.
No, and here's the thing: you're talking about innovation, and this is fascinating technology. Like what you can do with this, I think this has potential to really change the way we test and interface with 3D software, which is something that everybody's doing. There's 3D printing now more than ever, where you make chocolates out of printer, which I think is amazing. But there's also just prototyping, and even a lot of industries are going to looking in the computer first instead of making models by hand. Mm-hmm. This kind of brings back that tactile that allows you, and this is in its infancy, of course, but I do like the idea that they're doing it. But again, I go back to the innovation side. Mm-hmm. MIT is known for innovation. Yes. They're the ones that are pushing the envelope further and faster than anybody, and they always have been. Mm-hmm. But what I thought was interesting was their video series, which is called the Labcast.
Yes.
And I was really impressed by that, only because, and I watched another one that's very similar on another site, but it shows the innovation and the team and the people working on it. So you're looking and getting to know this engineer who worked on this, and from his own words, he's explaining what impact it has and what it's going to do. And you get the excitement, and you get this warm and fuzzy feeling about MIT. And I think that that's one key way that we can use the technology video to get across what it is that is inside the companies that we are marketing for. How do you show that you're an innovator? You don't just put it on a site and say, we're innovative. It's through videos like this showing your innovation, proving that it works, showing that you're willing to take risks, invest in the people who you've hired to do fantastic work, and put that out there and say, this is what we do every day and have been for years and years and years.
I was impressed by a couple things. Yeah, this is MIT's Media Lab, which is very world-renowned. Mm-hmm. Does a great job marketing itself through the Labcasts. You're getting to the third story as well, and that's telling the story. And you know what? They gave some... He's a philosopher, mm-hmm. and he was merging that with engineering. He was going into some philosophy, which connected me to this story. But I'll tell you what else, and this is very commonplace in science, is that if you read that first paragraph here, Jean-Ha Lee is the engineer / philosopher. Did Jean-Ha Lee create this in a vacuum by himself? Almost when we think of Edison, we think of him just working alone, but he worked with a lot of people. This guy, Jean-Ha Lee, worked with 2 other people. And in science, you almost never see a paper with just one person's mm-hmm. name on it. It's this guy and it's not just from one institution typically. And that, when we talk about innovation, you often see that connected with collaboration. And when you look at a marketing firm, look at how those people work together. They have to mesh seamlessly and have a vision that works together. The creative team, the account team, the online team, the digital, I guess we call it here, the PR team, they all have to be on the same page. And I think we have great case studies that show that. I guess I am talking a little bit about competitive group here, but I think it's something that people should look at in their own departments. How do we collaborate? How do we work together to make a better product? Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? It was interesting. I read the comments, and we both were wowed by this, and 99% of the comments were. But as usual, human skepticism creeps out. Somebody said, "I'm not impressed. Just pure visual fluff." So, you have these people, the poo-pooers, who do nothing but write comments on great articles.
Yeah,
all day.
And I can kind of see his point of view in a way. One of the things that I thought about is when you talk about user interfaces, I'm excited that they're challenging and they're moving and they're doing something very different. But I also think that just like anything else, there's an application for it. Right. So I still think Minority Report is the way, and I think of Gene Roddenberry's vision in Star Trek, which he's a writer and it's a movie and it's a series, but there's something there, that ability to interact. There's still that tactile feel that we still want, and it's very clear that that's what MIT's also seen, is that although we love this idea of voice activated in our cars and our cell phones and things like that, there's still a part of us that needs to feel the physical connection to what we're working with. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, I feel like this is maybe down the road, maybe there's an application for it, but I also see that touch is still very important.
Right.
That's the key out of this that I get.
And I think that's what's so short-sighted about going, this is just a globe moving in space. As you said, what's the application for it? And humans are ingenious enough to figure this out. Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about why we should go to space, and just the things that the effect of man making the ambition to go to the moon and do things in space has so much application for the rest of us. We didn't set out to warm food quickly in a microwave. That didn't happen.
No, that was a pure accident. Actually.
And that came from the space program. So these applications will find themselves.
So did Velcro.
Velcro came with it. What about I heard this story about the astronauts. They were trying to find a pen that would work upside down,
I love this.
because it requires gravity. And they actually spent, years. I'm making that up. They spent a lot of time trying to make this space pen. Meanwhile, what did they use in space? They used a pencil. So, anyway, I don't know if that's the same story you were thinking about, but yeah. So this third story.
This one is exciting.
And this one is it goes back to marketing, but when we talk about the economy, we talk about innovation. What's the value of you? What's the value of your economy? How do you protect that? How do you build that? It's through your reputation, and it's how you tell your story. Do you want to take us through this one, Doug?
Yeah, this one really got me excited because I do think that this is something that, bringing it back to competitive a little bit, but I think a good marketer in general, your goal is to try to tell a story and to get people to engage with you. The gist of this article is as you start to look at the way marketing has changed in the last few years, for example, especially, is that we have a lot to learn from telling the story. It's not just about selling something anymore. It's about telling a story behind it. And then the article itself is it's time for advertising to take a lesson from public relations. And you and I talked about this a little bit in depth on how it almost feels like public relations, it could almost be the lead for these things. You think about it. A lot of the products that we've been charged of working with lately, it's not so much of a it's not so much that there's not awareness of the product, and perhaps there is, but it's like, what can this do for me? It's not about, oh, hey, there's this new product, you should buy it because it's amazing. No. What does it do for me? How does it fit into my life? How does it make it better? And they, of course, bring up the classic examples of Apple, of Nike. You and I have talked about Red Bull in the past. I honestly don't think they sell Red Bull anymore. They sell the lifestyle and they sell the brand behind it, and it's more of the story of who you want to be when you look at a Red Bull ad. Apple really tries to tell you this is what you need, this is the next thing that you need in your life. They're not selling an iPad, they're selling the connection between you and your family, for example. Like things have changed, and that to me, that this is all my take, of course. That is more of a public relations thing, that they're using those same tactics instead of just the classical marketing tactics.
And there's a lot of thoughts in my head, and one of them is the article that you sent me about a guy. This is someone in the car industry who doesn't believe in branding. It's not about the brand. It's the product, stupid. If you don't make the next great product, someone's going to pass you up regardless of the brand. Mm-hmm. And you think about Apple, they make great products. And they seldom advertise past that one Super Bowl commercial, right? In fact, they didn't. They switched to a PR. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. I do believe in brand. He talks about writing a narrative for your brand. But of course, it has to work with a product.
Yeah.
I think he sets up a little bit of a straw man argument to get some readers, and you're talking about that a little bit. PR versus advertising, and PR is traditional tactics, community building. Advertising's a one-page advertisement yelling at you. Here's a couple things. First of all, this guy is a executive vice president of digital marketing. So in this new age, it works together. We meaning marketers, all own storytelling. And it all works together. The Old Spice commercial, it started with an ad, went to online communities, but the story was told, and the story is integrated. So I don't believe it's within the domain of any one department. Mm-hmm. I think we all tell stories, and they all support the brand. That's my opinion on that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think I'm very much a person who I understand how articles get written. They're there to grab your attention. But when he says statements like people don't buy brands, they join them. We get what he's trying to say with that. They're joining these communities on Pepsi and Nike and Old Spice. But really? Is that all they do? Do I join every brand? Do I sign up for every community? I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd be like online, actively engaged in the community. I think, as with anything, there's a role for every tactic we have in the book. And that's why you need to have a marketing agency that can see everything like that, so that we're very neutral and can customize a program to what our customers need. Mm-hmm. It could be an ad, right? It could be a direct mail piece. A direct mail piece could lead to a community or might not. We might need simple awareness. If I see that commercial on TV for a hamburger and I feel hungry, I might go get that Wendy's burger. Would I join that Wendy's community online? I don't know. It depends on who I am.
Yeah. I think when I think of brands, I think of the larger brands that have been for a while. Like, I mean, again, not to beat a dead horse with the Apple story, but there are people who are just fanatic that they wait, and that's one of the things that they talked about. But Apple doesn't need to say that their products are amazing and popular, because all you do is you look on television, and the Channel 4 News picked up the fact that there's a line around the door or around the block to pick up the very next iPhone. Mm-hmm. You can't, like, they didn't make that up. They didn't make, that is the brand evangelism that I think a lot of companies really want. And I think of that, and of course I'm going to bring a car into this, but it's the same thing, like the old school. I just read an article this morning on my news feeds. There's always been like this GM versus Ford thing, like in the classic car days, and that still rages on. Now, a lot of that has eroded because things have changed. But there used to be, they're diehard Chevy people. They would never buy anything other than a Chevy. Why would they? It's inconceivable. But inconceivable. But now things have changed. So that's an example of how the story went in the other direction. But you look at Apple, and everybody wants to be Apple, and I contend, and I mentioned this to you earlier, Apple's only had this kind of fanaticism in the last 20 years. Oh, yeah. Apple's been around for more than 40.
Sure.
So it's interesting to see that change, almost 40 years, but it's interesting to see how that brand has evolved over the years, because it used to be, and then you get into these amazing products. Again, you have an amazing product to sell, but it's also how you sell it and how it fits into your life and how that story is told. And I think that, in my head at least, PR has always had the job of being the storytellers. We, of course, are storytellers also, but it's always been like, PR, public relations, and talking to people, and it always felt like the warm and fuzzier side of marketing. And another thing we talked about is how a lot of times PR isn't integrated, and it should be. PR should, that's the thing I get out of this, is almost like we should all be PR agents. We're not, I shouldn't be on the creative side. We should all be PR agents.
We should all be storytellers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting about the Apple. I remember being in a Starbucks and someone just coming up to me like, "You have an Apple?" Oh, like there's an instant infinity. Now I'm okay. Apples are great, but I could see that love that he had and that he wanted to connect just because I had an Apple. A lot of our clients are in the Me Too industry. Maybe they sell pipettes. Maybe they sell some of these instruments that other people sell. And there's a role for branding for that. There's a role for storytelling for that. I think about one of my favorite parodies that we've talked about. It's called I'm trying to remember, Bad Company or Bad Research. Bad Project. There we go. I knew it was going to get Bad Project. Is done by the Jung Lab. I would say hundreds of thousands of hits. Right, we're talking about a limited audience. It's quite funny. It talks about a scientist getting her graduate degree and all the challenges that they have to go to. One of the favorite parts is she's pointing her Eppendorf, which are the tubes that contain DNA or whatever sample you're looking at. And she's like, "I can't read this." And you can see why, because it's all written in Chinese. These are things. Now, these are things that you relate to. Think if a pipette or Western Blotting or PCR company were able to do some kind of video like this, where you're like, I get you guys. I get your problems with PCR. And I think that's the role of all of us, marketers and branding experts, is to relate to our customers' pain points, maybe make it humorous, but develop that emotional connection. Not just this feature set of speed, accuracy, this faster, better, smarter, but how do you feel when you encounter this problem, and then how does it make you feel when you can do it that much better with this instrument or technique or what have you? And I really get a lot of inspiration from that. If you want to break through the clutter, if you want to get past just advertising, which I think is table stakes, think about some of these other ways to tell your story.
Yeah.
So I think we've wrapped up the 3 articles for May 2012. The economy, it's been in the news. Certainly nobody is immune to that. Be thankful if you have a job, but don't be afraid to try. There's always going to be skeptics out there, like that guy who thought this was just a bunch of fluff. But be bold. Experiment, collaborate, figure out what your story is, and hopefully you'll be able to avoid the food stamp line.
Yeah.
This is our conversation. Please email us, conversation@competitive.com, or tweet us @competitive. And this is Ken signing off.
And this is Don Harder signing off. Thank you very much for listening.